Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The day I almost broke. Have you ever smiled at everyone around you while quietly falling apart inside? That was me on an ordinary Tuesday morning in the United States. My coffee tasted bitter, my inbox was overflowing, and even the simplest English sentence felt difficult to say out loud. I thought I needed to work harder. I thought I needed to be stronger. But before that day ended, my manager would say 5 unexpected words that completely changed my life, my marriage, and the way I learned English forever. The alarm rang at 6 a.m., but I had already been awake for almost an hour. My mind refused to rest. I kept thinking about unfinished emails, family responsibilities, and another busy day waiting for me. My husband noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "You didn't sleep well again," he said softly. I forced a smile. "I'm fine." It was the easiest sentence to say. It was also the least honest. The drive to work felt unusually quiet. Summer sunlight filled the streets, yet I couldn't enjoy it. Even my favorite music sounded like background noise. When I arrived at the office, everyone greeted each other with warm smiles and fresh coffee. I smiled back, but inside, I felt completely exhausted. That morning, I made small mistakes I normally never made. I forgot an attachment in an email. I mixed up 2 meeting times. I even struggled to remember a simple English phrase during a conversation. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I quietly opened the small notebook I always carried with me. Every day, I practiced one easy English sentence. That morning I wrote, "I will take one step today." I read it slowly. Then I whispered it again. Sometimes simple English also brings simple peace. Just before lunch, my manager stopped by my desk. "Emily," he asked gently, "do you have a minute?" My heart immediately began racing. Had I made another mistake? We walked into a quiet meeting room. He didn't open a laptop. He didn't mention deadlines. Instead, he looked at me with genuine concern. "You've seemed different lately." I tried to smile again. "I'm just a little tired." He nodded. "I understand." Then he said something I had never expected to hear at work. "Why don't you take a mental health day?" I blinked. "A what?" "A mental health day," he repeated kindly. "Take tomorrow off. Rest. Spend time with your family. Come back when you feel like yourself again." For several seconds, I couldn't answer. Nobody had ever encouraged me to rest before. I had always believed asking for a break meant I wasn't strong enough. As I left his office, I wondered if accepting that offer would make me look weak, or if saying yes would become the strongest decision I had ever made. At that moment, I had no idea one unexpected day off was about to reveal a truth my family had been trying to tell me for months. One day changed everything. What if the most productive thing you could do today was absolutely nothing? I kept asking myself that question after my manager suggested taking a mental health day. Part of me wanted to ignore his advice and return to work as if everything were normal. Another part of me was secretly hoping he was right. I had no idea that one quiet Wednesday in the United States would help me rediscover my family, my confidence, and even a new way to learn English through everyday life. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I turned off my work alarm. The silence felt unfamiliar. Instead of rushing to check emails, I made a slow breakfast with my husband. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and warm toast. For the first time in weeks, neither of us looked at our phones. He smiled. "I've missed mornings like this." His words stayed with me. Had work become so loud that I could no longer hear the people I loved? After breakfast, I decided to take a walk through a nearby neighborhood park. The air was cool. Birds filled the trees with soft songs. Parents pushed strollers along the walking paths while older couples held hands on quiet benches. Life seemed slower outside the office. I opened my English notebook and wrote one simple sentence. "I can slow down." Then I repeated it while walking. Slow English. Slow breathing. Slow thinking. Everything suddenly felt connected. Near a small pond, I met an elderly woman feeding ducks. She smiled and asked, "Day off from work?" "Yes," I answered. "A mental health day." She nodded as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Good," she said. "You take care of your car. Don't forget to take care of your mind." I laughed softly. Such simple English. Such powerful wisdom. We talked for only a few minutes, but her words stayed with me long after we said goodbye. Later that afternoon, I picked up my children from school instead of after-school care. Their surprised faces made me smile. "Mom, you're early," my son shouted. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. We laughed. We talked. No one was in a hurry. That evening, my daughter quietly slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. "I made this for you." Inside was a drawing of our family holding hands under a bright blue sky. At the top, she had written 5 simple words. "I like you home today." I smiled, but my eyes filled with tears. If one day away from work meant this much to my children, what else had I been missing? Just before bedtime, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my manager. "I hope today helped. Tomorrow, I'd love to tell you why our company started offering mental health days in the first place." I suddenly realized this story was much bigger than one day off. The story behind mental health days. Have you ever discovered that a company policy wasn't created to improve business, but to save people? I returned to work feeling calmer than I had in weeks, yet I couldn't stop thinking about my manager's message. Why would a busy American company encourage employees to take a day off simply to rest? I expected a practical explanation about productivity or performance. Instead, I heard a true story that completely changed the way I understood success, family, and mental health. The office looked exactly the same as always. Computers hummed. Coffee machines buzzed. Coworkers greeted one another with cheerful smiles. But something inside me felt lighter. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't rushing. I was simply present. After lunch, my manager invited me into his office. He closed the door gently and handed me a cup of tea. "No meeting," he said with a smile. "Just a conversation." I relaxed immediately. He looked out the window before speaking. "Several years ago," he began, "one of our best employees resigned without warning." I listened carefully. Everyone thought she was leaving for a better job. He paused. But the truth was much harder. She had been overwhelmed for months. She kept saying she was fine. Those words sounded painfully familiar. No one realized how exhausted she was until she finally walked away. The room became very quiet. After that, he continued, our leadership team decided something had to change. So we introduced mental health days. Not because people are weak. Because they're human. I couldn't say anything for a moment. Those simple words reached deeper than I expected. Human. Not perfect. Just human. I opened my notebook. Instead of writing new vocabulary, I wrote one short sentence. It's okay to rest. I read it slowly. Sometimes the easiest English sentences become the hardest truths to accept. My manager smiled when he saw the notebook. Still practicing every day? Yes. That's a good habit. Then he added something I will never forget. Learning a language takes patience. So does learning to be kind to yourself. That sentence stayed with me all afternoon. After work, I drove home without turning on the radio. I wanted silence. Not because I felt empty. Because, for the first time in weeks, silence felt peaceful. When I walked through the front door, my husband looked at me for a moment and smiled. You look different. Do I? You look like you've been able to breathe again. I laughed softly. Maybe he was right. Maybe rest doesn't change the world around us. Maybe it changes the way we see it. Just as we sat down for dinner, my phone vibrated. It was an email from Human Resources. The subject line immediately caught my attention. Would you be willing to share your mental health day experience with the entire company? The email I almost ignored. What if one email sitting quietly in your inbox had the power to change not only your career, but also someone else's life? I stared at the invitation from Human Resources for several minutes. They wanted me to speak about my mental health day in front of coworkers. My first instinct was to decline. I wasn't a motivational speaker. I was just an ordinary woman trying to balance work, marriage, children, and the constant feeling that I should always be doing more. But deep inside, another voice whispered that perhaps my story wasn't only mine anymore. I closed my laptop and walked into the living room. My husband noticed the thoughtful look on my face. What happened? I handed him my phone. He read the email slowly. Then he smiled. I think you should do it. I laughed nervously. Me? Stand in front of everyone? I'm not good at public speaking. He reached for my hand. You don't have to be perfect. You only have to be honest. His words sounded simple. Yet honesty had always been more frightening than perfection. Later that evening, while my children finished their homework, I opened my small English notebook again. Instead of practicing difficult vocabulary, I wrote another short sentence. My story may help someone. I repeated it several times. Slowly. Clearly. Listening to my own voice somehow made the sentence feel more believable. The next morning, I accepted the invitation. Almost immediately, HR replied with warm encouragement. They explained that several employees had recently shared personal experiences about stress, burnout, and finding healthier ways to work. No one was expected to give a perfect speech. They simply wanted real stories. That made me feel a little less afraid. During lunch, one of my coworkers quietly approached my desk. I heard you're speaking next week. I nodded. She lowered her voice. I've been thinking about taking a mental health day too. I looked surprised. You have? She smiled weakly. I've been pretending everything is fine. Her words echoed my own from only a few days earlier. Suddenly, I understood why these conversations mattered. People weren't looking for experts. They were looking for permission to be human. That afternoon, I practiced my English while driving home. I was not weak. I needed rest. I found hope. The sentences were short, making them perfect for English learners. But they also became quiet reminders to myself. When I arrived home, my daughter handed me a colorful drawing. It showed our family sitting together at dinner. Above our heads she had written, in her neat handwriting, "Mom smiles more now." I held the picture close to my heart. Maybe children notice healing before adults do. Just before bedtime, another email arrived from HR. This one included the event schedule. As I scrolled down the page, my heart skipped a beat. More than 200 employees had already registered to attend. I suddenly realized my small story was about to become something much bigger than I had ever imagined. The room fell completely silent. Have you ever stood in front of hundreds of people and realized your heartbeat was louder than your own voice? As I waited backstage with a small notebook in my hands, I wondered if I should simply walk away. Maybe no one wanted to hear an ordinary story about stress, family, and one unexpected mental health day. But a few minutes later, something happened that proved ordinary stories often have the greatest power to change lives. The conference room was brighter than I expected. Rows of chairs stretched across the room. Coworkers chatted quietly while waiting for the event to begin. Some held coffee cups. Others smiled as they recognized familiar faces. I took a deep breath. My hands felt cold. Inside my notebook, I had written only 5 simple English sentences. No complicated grammar. No difficult vocabulary. Just honest words. My name is Emily. I love my family. I thought I was fine. I learned to rest. I came back stronger. I smiled to myself. Sometimes the simplest English carries the deepest meaning. When my name was announced, my legs felt unusually heavy. I walked to the front of the room. More than 200 faces looked toward me. For a second, I forgot every sentence I had practiced. The microphone suddenly seemed much too loud. Then I noticed something unexpected. In the front row sat my manager. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't checking notes. He simply smiled with quiet encouragement. That smile helped me breathe again. I introduced myself slowly. Then I began telling the truth. I spoke about sleepless nights. About pretending everything was okay. About saying I'm fine even when I wasn't. The room became completely silent. Nobody interrupted. Nobody looked bored. People were listening. Really listening. As I continued, I shared the story of my mental health day, the peaceful walk through the park, the elderly woman feeding ducks, and the drawing my daughter had made. I noticed several people quietly wiping away tears. Others nodded as if they had lived the same story themselves. When I finished speaking, I thanked everyone for listening. For one long second, no one moved. Then the entire room stood up. The applause was louder than I had imagined. But what touched me most wasn't the applause. It was what happened afterward. Employees I barely knew began walking toward me. One after another. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. I needed to hear this today. Each conversation reminded me that invisible struggles are often shared by many people. As I prepared to leave the room, the vice president of our company approached with a warm smile. "Emily," she said softly, "there's someone very special who wants to meet you." I looked past her shoulder and saw a familiar face I had never expected to see standing inside our office. The visitor I never expected. What if the person waiting to thank you was someone you had unknowingly inspired years before? I followed the vice president through the crowd, my mind racing with questions. The applause had barely faded, yet another surprise was already waiting. I expected to meet an executive or a new employee. Instead, I came face to face with someone whose quiet courage would make me realize that healing spreads farther than we ever imagine. Standing near the window was Sarah. She had worked on my team several years earlier before transferring to another department. We hadn't spoken in a long time. The moment she saw me, she smiled with tears in her eyes. "I've wanted to thank you for years," she said. I looked at her in surprise. "For what?" She laughed softly. "You probably don't even remember." I searched my memory. Nothing came to mind. She explained that during one especially stressful week, she had looked completely overwhelmed. Everyone else had been rushing from meeting to meeting. I had simply stopped by her desk and asked one question. "Are you really okay?" She told me those 4 words had stayed with her. No one had asked me that in months. Soon afterward, she had spoken with her manager, taken time to recover, and slowly rebuilt her confidence. "I thought your kindness saved my job," she said. "But today I realized it may have saved something even more important. My health." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I had completely forgotten that small conversation. It had felt ordinary to me. To her, it had changed everything. As we talked, I quietly opened my notebook again. I wrote one new English sentence. Small kindness matters. I repeated it slowly. It was easy to pronounce. Even easier to remember. Sometimes the best English lessons come from real life instead of textbooks. Before leaving, Sarah handed me a folded thank you card. Inside she had written, "Your story reminded me that asking for help is a sign of courage, not weakness." I carefully placed the card inside my notebook. On the drive home, I smiled more than I had in weeks. The roads looked the same. The traffic sounded the same. Yet everything felt different. That evening, my husband noticed my expression before I even said a word. "You had a good day." I really did. We shared dinner with our children, laughing over simple stories from school and work. The house felt warmer somehow. Not because anything around us had changed. Because I had. Just before bedtime, my phone rang. It was my manager. "I hope I'm not calling too late," he said. "Not at all." He paused for a moment. "The leadership team watched your presentation. They've made a decision." "What kind of decision?" I asked. His next sentence made me sit upright in complete disbelief. "We'd like you to help create a new mental wellness program for the entire company." A new purpose began. What if the hardest season of your life was actually preparing you for your greatest purpose? I could hardly sleep after my manager's phone call. Me? Help design a mental wellness program for the entire company? Just weeks earlier, I had been quietly struggling to get through each workday. Now, somehow, my own story had opened a door I never imagined existed. I accepted the invitation with excitement, but I had no idea the first planning meeting would reveal a truth that would stay with me forever. The conference room looked different this time. There were no speeches. No microphones. Just a circle of chairs. Human resources, team leaders, and employees from different departments gathered together with notebooks and coffee. Everyone had one goal. To make the workplace healthier for everyone. The meeting began with a simple question. What helps you feel supported at work? The answers surprised me. One person said flexible hours. Another mentioned quiet spaces for focused work. Someone else talked about taking a short walk outside during difficult afternoons. Then it was my turn. I took a slow breath. I think people need permission to be honest. The room became very quiet. I continued. When I kept saying I was fine, I wasn't asking for help because I believed everyone expected me to be strong all the time. Several people nodded. One manager admitted that he had once hidden his own stress from his team. Another employee shared that she had delayed taking vacation for almost 2 years. It suddenly became clear that burnout doesn't choose one job or one person. It can quietly affect anyone. During a short break, I opened my little English notebook. Today's sentence was simple. I am not alone. I repeated it softly. The words felt comforting. If you're learning English, try saying them with me. I am not alone. Sometimes language practice also becomes heart practice. As the meeting ended, the HR director thanked everyone. Then she surprised us. "We're creating a new tradition," she announced. "Every month, one employee will share a real-life story about resilience, family, or mental health." Everyone smiled. Stories, not statistics. People, not perfection. That idea felt exactly right. When I arrived home that evening, my children were waiting at the kitchen table. They had made colorful cards decorated with hearts and stars. One card read, "We're proud of you, Mom." Another simply said, "Thank you for smiling again." I hugged them tightly. Success suddenly had a different meaning. It wasn't about promotions or titles. It was about being fully present for the people I loved. Later that night, an email from the CEO appeared in my inbox. The subject line caught my attention immediately. "Emily, I'd like to personally invite you to speak at our annual company conference next month." The CEO's unexpected challenge. What if the biggest opportunity of your life didn't begin with praise, but with one unexpected question? I read the CEO's email 3 times before I believed it was real. Speaking at the company's annual conference was something senior executives usually did, not someone like me. I assumed he wanted me to repeat the same story about my mental health day. Instead, his challenge would push me far beyond anything I had imagined and completely change the direction of my future. The conference was held in a bright event center filled with employees from offices across the United States. The room buzzed with conversation. People laughed. They exchanged ideas. There was an energy I had never experienced before. When the CEO greeted me, he smiled warmly. "Emily," he said, "thank you for being here." "I should be thanking you," I replied. He shook his head. "No. You reminded us that healthy people build healthy workplaces." His words immediately eased my nerves. Before the event officially began, we talked for several minutes. Then he surprised me. "I don't want you to give the same presentation." I looked at him with curiosity. "I'd like you to answer one question." "What question?" He smiled. "What does success mean to you now?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. A few months earlier, I would have talked about promotions, deadlines, and performance. Now my answer felt completely different. When my turn came, I walked onto the stage carrying only my small English notebook. No slides. No complicated speech. I opened to a blank page and wrote one sentence. "Success begins with balance." Then I looked at the audience. I used to believe success meant never stopping. But I learned that constantly running eventually makes you forget why you started. The room became wonderfully quiet. I shared stories about my family dinners, my children's drawings, my peaceful walks, and the kindness of coworkers who had listened without judgment. I also encouraged everyone to practice one simple English sentence each day. That habit had helped me slow my thoughts as much as it improved my language skills. Today's sentence was easy. I choose balance. I invited everyone to repeat it with me. Hundreds of voices quietly echoed the words. It was one of the most beautiful moments I had ever experienced. After the presentation, employees lined up to say hello. Some thanked me. Others shared their own stories. One young employee admitted she had been afraid to request time off for months. Another promised to spend more evenings with his children. As the crowd slowly disappeared, the CEO handed me a small envelope. "I think you're ready for your next chapter," he said. Curious, I opened it. Inside was an invitation unlike anything I had expected. It wasn't for another speech. It wasn't a promotion. It was an offer that could allow my story to reach thousands of families across America, and I had only one weekend to decide. The decision that scared me most. What if saying yes to your biggest opportunity also meant facing your biggest fear? I held the envelope all the way home without opening it again. My mind raced with questions. Was I really ready to share my story beyond my company? Could an ordinary wife, mother, and employee make any difference to complete strangers? The answer seemed impossible to find, yet one quiet weekend with my family would reveal exactly what I needed to do. That evening, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. My husband looked at it with curiosity. "You're not opening it again?" "I already know what's inside," I replied. "I'm just not sure I'm ready." He smiled gently. Sometimes the right decision doesn't feel comfortable. It feels meaningful. The next morning, we packed a simple picnic and drove to our favorite park. The weather was beautiful. Children laughed on the playground. Families walked their dogs. Everything felt peaceful. As we spread a blanket under a large oak tree, my son looked up at me. "Mom, are you thinking about work again?" His question caught me by surprise. I laughed softly. A little. He picked up a small stone and skipped it across the pond. "You're happier now. I don't want you to be sad again." His words were simple. Children often speak with a wisdom adults forget. While my family played nearby, I opened my English notebook. The page was blank. After a moment, I wrote one short sentence. "I can help others." I read it slowly. Again. And again. Practicing easy English had become much more than language learning. It had become a way of calming my heart before making important decisions. Later that afternoon, my daughter quietly sat beside me. She slipped her hand into mine. "Mom?" "Yes?" "When you tell stories, people smile." "How do you know?" "Because you smile first." I felt tears filling my eyes. Maybe courage isn't about speaking without fear. Maybe it's about speaking with love. On Sunday evening, I finally opened the envelope once more. The invitation was from a non-profit organization that partnered with companies across the United States to promote mental wellness for working families. They wanted me to become one of their volunteer storytellers. Not because I was famous. Because my story felt real. I looked at my husband. He already knew my answer before I said a word. "I think I have to do this." He nodded proudly. "I think you already have." Just before I sent my reply, another email appeared in my inbox. It came from someone whose name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Your speech helped save my marriage, and I need to tell you why." The ending became a beginning. What if one honest story could quietly change lives you would never meet? I opened the email expecting a simple thank you message. Instead, I found myself reading every sentence through tears. The stranger explained that after hearing my talk, he and his wife canceled their divorce appointment, spent an entire weekend talking without phones or distractions, and decided to rebuild their marriage. In that moment, I realized that healing has a way of traveling farther than we can ever imagine. I sat quietly in the living room. Outside, the evening sun painted the sky with soft shades of orange. My family laughed together in the backyard. For a few moments, I simply listened. Months earlier, I had been too exhausted to notice little sounds like these. Now they felt like gifts. The email continued. "You reminded me that asking for help isn't weakness. It is love." Those words stayed with me long after I closed my laptop. The next morning, I accepted the invitation from the nonprofit organization. I knew I couldn't solve everyone's problems, but I could tell my story. Sometimes that is enough. Over the following months, I visited workplaces, community centers, and family events across the United States. Everywhere I went, people shared stories that sounded surprisingly familiar. Busy parents, tired professionals, couples trying to reconnect, young employees learning that success means more than constant productivity. Before every talk, I still opened my small English notebook. The tradition never changed. On the first page of each presentation, I wrote one simple sentence. Take care of yourself. Then I invited everyone to repeat it slowly. Take care of yourself. Easy words. Powerful meaning. If you are learning English with this story, remember that simple sentences often stay in your heart the longest. You don't need difficult vocabulary to express hope, kindness, or love. One evening, after returning home from another event, my daughter hugged me tightly. "I'm happy you're helping people," she whispered. Then she smiled. "But I'm even happier you're home tonight." I smiled back. She was right. The greatest success was never standing on a stage. It was sitting around our dinner table, laughing with my husband and children, fully present in the moment. Looking back, I realize my mental health day was never just a day off. It was the first step toward a healthier marriage, a closer family, stronger friendships, and a life filled with greater purpose. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is pause, breathe, and allow ourselves to heal. And sometimes, one simple story told with an honest heart becomes the beginning of someone else's hope. Thank you for listening, reading, and practicing English with me today. Never forget this simple sentence. Your mind matters. Your family matters. You matter. That's all for today. I'll create many more stories like this in the future. Please subscribe so you won't miss the next one.